Okay.
Thank
Over
you.
to you, Karthik. Over to you, Dr. Karthik Narayanan. Karthik Narayanan.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's start. Before I start myself, before I start the so-called workshop, let me make it very clear. It's not going to be a class, even though I'm using a Google Classroom. It's going to be a hands-on workshop. So I don't want to call it a classroom. I would want to use it, call it rather as a hands-on workshop from the beginning. Now, all of you can see my slide.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you. Oh, sorry. Some template error. Okay, that's I'll correct it before I give it send it out for circulation. So thank you for the kind invitation, Professor Estogi, and also thank you for the kind introduction, Madri. It was really great. Before we start, I would want to know actually who are all the participants here. I've already got to know some of your names from your Google Sheets, but some of you haven't not actually filled the information. So can you guys quickly tell me who are you and what you guys do, and what is the intention of joining us in this workshop? Let me not go into the presentation mode right now, but let me start with.
Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Please.
I teach linguistics, and I'm working since last 20 years with the community. And the problem with me, which I've faced during my work of data management, how to manage my data. As things are, technology is developing, so I think I must learn new technology to manage my data. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, I don't want to call names, so if people can take turn and speak, it will be better.
Do you want me to call a name?
No, ma'am. They can take.
Okay.
They can take themselves.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm Dr. Samir Debbarma, working as assistant professor in Kokborok, Tripura University, and my mother tongue is Kokborok. I'm native speaker of Kokborok.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. The next person.
Hello everyone, my name is Ajay Kumar Singh, research scholar, Department of Linguistics, University of Lucknow, and I hope many of you know me. So here I am in the class to learning new thing. Thank you very much, ma'am, and Karthik as well. Thank you, Madri, ma'am.
Thank you, Ajay.
Hi Karthik, Bharat this side.
Next,
Hello,
please.
Hi Karthik, Bharat this side. I think we have met at IGNCA.
Yes, Bharat.
How are you?
I'm good, Bharat. I'm good.
Data management we have learned there also, and I'm here also to learn more furthermore. And I am a research scholar here at Lucknow University. So while doing the project for Spell, I had no idea about this data management, because the time we were filling that metadata form, I really had no idea what to fill. But now I'm feeling that it was very important to fill, because it was having so much data, or the concerned items were to be filled for our data, which can be used for further use. So I think it will be more beneficial for us to learn more in this webinar, or sorry, workshop.
Thank you. The next person, please. Let me just call out name. Diksha.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Diksha Verma. I'm a research scholar from the Department of Linguistics, Assam University, Silchar. Okay, I'm working in Sadri language that is spoken in Assam, as well as the Nagpuri Sadri, which is spoken in Jharkhand. So I am doing a phonological study of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Unmesha, if I got the name right.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Myself, Unmesha Datta. I'm a research scholar at Assam University, Silchar. I'm now working on Thai Ital language of Assam. So I'm new to this research field. So I really want to know more about data, with how to manage the data. That's why I joined this workshop. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Unmesha. Don't call me sir. Address me as Karthik, please.
Yes, sir.
Ibtesam, if I'm right.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Iftesam Ahmed from Assam University. I'm a PhD research scholar, and I'm working on Sunwar language that is spoken in Sikkim. But this language is mainly from Nepal. But I am working on the variety that found in Sikkim only.
Thank you.
I'm from Assam University. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dhanpati ji. We know you, but still.
Yes. Hello, Kartik. You put G and all. It sounds.
Yeah, Dhanpati. just kidding. Okay, Dhanpati, please. Yeah.
Okay. Myself, Dhanapati Shaugrapam, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics, Central University of Rajasthan. And as Madri also has put forward that your session is going to be, and this is a field which is always enriching and evolving, and there's always new things to learn. And I'm really looking forward to new insights. And I've been waiting since 4 o'clock
Yes,
for your session. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dhanpati. Najima?
Yes, sir. Good
Yes,
evening,
Najima.
everyone. This is Najima from Assam University, Silchar. I'm an MPhil research scholar. I have just appeared my IPP and has not started my research work. So I'm looking forward to learn something how to manage data so that I can start my work. And I'm planning to do work in Assamese language. I'm a speaker of Assamese, so looking forward to learn something.
Thank you, Najima. Pranjit?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. This is Sohail from
Hello, sir.
Jammu and Kashmir. I am working as teacher in high school. I am PhD in English. I just work on my mother tongue, known as Kha language. So therefore, I joined this workshop. I want to learn new things.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail. Pranjit?
Yes. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Dhanapati ma'am and Bobita ma'am. Very glad to see you after long days. I'm Pranjit Deori, PhD research scholar, Department of Linguistics, Assam University. My teachers are there, Dhanapati ma'am and Bobita ma'am. I use them a lot, and I'm working on my Tiwa language. My mother tongue is Tiwa, although I don't know my Tiwa language properly, but I'm learning my language. So I'll be very happy to join this. I'm very happy to join this workshop because digital archiving is a very essential for the endangered language. So I think this workshop will teach me a lot, and it will be very grateful. It will be very grateful for us also to archive this language and digital archiving. Thank you, sir. Hello,
Thank you, Pranjit. Sohini? Sohini? We should move on to next person. Yeah, Sohini.
The work that I intend to do is a comparative work on Bengali as social media, and I am here to join this session because I feel, as Professor was talking, the use of technology in data management. So this is very important, I feel. So that's why I'm here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sohini. Rita?
Hello, sir. My name is Rita Shah, and I'm a MPhil research scholar from Assam University, Silchar, and I'm working on Tai Phake language of Assam.
Thank you, Rita.
Yes.
Bobita ma'am?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bobita from Center for Endangered Language, Tezpur University, and I'm interested to know more on data management for this. I'm very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you. And Samhita?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Samhita Bharadwaj. I'm from Tezpur University, working here as a research associate. And my mother tongue is Assamese, but I have also worked on Boro and Raba, which are endangered languages in the past. So I would like to know more about data management from this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Bipasha?
Yeah, hello everyone. Um, it's always good to see Madri and Kartik working and working them together. You know, probably they are going to do something good. So I found it interesting, and of course, metadata and data management is always fascinating, whatever field it is. And linguistic data management has been neglected for so many years. Now people have taken interest, and fortunately in our university, Tezpur University, where I work as a professor, assistant professor, Dr. Bobita Sarangchen, who just talked a few minutes back, she is handling the Center for Endangered Languages metadata. And unfortunately, I was not in that part of the project. But of course, looking forward to Kartik's presentation and learning more things. Good to see you, Kartik, on work.
Thank you, thank you, Bipasha. It was nice to get back to you after a long time. Rajlakshmi?
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Raj Lakshmi Kaur. I am a research scholar of Assam University Silchar, Department of Linguistics, and I am working on Tayahum language. And I am also happy for getting the opportunity to learn from your workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajlakshmi. Samir? Samir Debarman, oh, you are already introduced. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Samir. Mas?
Oh, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mas. Yes, Mas.
Okay, yeah. I'm Maz Sheikh from JNU. I'm a research scholar at JNU at the Center of Linguistics, and I am into field linguistics and language documentation. Currently, for my MPhil, I am documenting the Azamgari language, and I'm also interested in the Western Himalayan languages. So actually, I am traveling right now, and the train has now halted at Mathura station, so you people are now audible. Otherwise, I had to reconnect so many times.
Oh, Mas. But Mas, I'm sure you would know most of the things that I'm going to teach in the workshop. I saw your collection at the Korsal deposit. I'm very happy for it. Congratulations, Mas.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much. Looking forward to learn more from you.
Let's see whether I can meet your requirements, Mas. Okay. Thank you all. And Madhuri has already introduced me. So before we start the workshop, I want to make two things clear. Throughout the workshop is planned with a bit of theory and with a lot of work. Basically, you're going to do hands-on work. You're going to do things on the computer, and then you're going to send it to me through using the Google Classroom. Or for those of you who are accessing it from a mobile phone, I'm going to put in my no, I would still. Are all of you comfortable with Google Classroom? Are there anyone who is still struggling with the Google Classroom? Because I want to see what you're doing, and if you're working on a mobile and you're using your pen and paper to do the work, to do the activities of the workshop, then I want you to take a photo of your sheet and send it to me. So this is a workshop where you will be expected to do stuff, and where you have to do stuff. So if you're on a laptop, you're well said and done. If you're on a mobile phone, I would request you to bring a pen and a notebook with a few blank pages. So you will be doing a lot of writing down, and then you will be taking a photo of it, and then you will be sharing it to me through the Google Classroom. So I will be uploading each activity as a Google Classroom assignment, and then you have to reply to that. And if you have a difficulty in doing this, we will try to do for those who are using laptop, you will directly share your answer scripts to me. And for those who are using your Google, those who are using your mobile phones, you will turn on your camera and show all of us your sheet with the workshop activity being done on it. Okay, is it okay? Have I made that clear? Okay, so okay, and one more thing, I don't take silence for no. I don't take silence for no or yes. I want a yes or a no every time. And if you have any problem, stop me then and there and ask me what it is, and we will correct it. Then we will move on. So the doubt that you may have might be silly, but silly doubts are sometimes the most important doubts that will clear our way ahead. So don't hesitate to ask any doubts, and if you have a doubt, ask us, stop me at any point of time. We can have a discussion on it, we can rectify it, and then we'll move ahead. So this 2 hours, the next 4 hours that we are going to spend in the workshop is absolutely for you. So please feel free to use me as an instructor as much as possible. Thank you. So let me start. As most of you have already started to point out, and as Professor Rastogi clearly said in the beginning of the class itself, in the workshop itself, that this is something that is not only restricted to language documentation. Language or linguistic data management is something that is going to be very useful for anyone who is going to deal with empirical data, especially data that is collected from the field, and then is going to use it for their research purpose. So all of you who are using such data or collected data, not just field collected data, even data from your psycholinguistic experience, this organizations of data or using or managing your data effectively and efficiently will help you do your research much easily. So the main aim here is to teach you linguistic data management, but here the sub aim of the course is to, or the workshop is to teach you linguistic data management for language archiving. So we are going to learn how do we use our data management skills to push towards language archiving or to move towards submitting our data to a language archive. So before I start about the whole nitty-gritties of the nuts and bolts of data management, I'm going to talk about what is data, what role does data play in especially the study of language, endangered languages, and what are language archives, who uses them, and what are submitted into a language archive. So this is sort of an introduction to the workshop. So in the meantime, for all of you who have a good network, please download the zip file that I have already sent you and unzip it and keep it. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you is, does data have a very important role in our responses to language endangerment? Does data play a crucial role? What kind of role can data play? Now, Srobnachalaya's recent book, Why Language Documentation Matters, gives us some of the answers for it. Okay, so a data is not just a data for proving or disproving a particular theory within linguistics or proving or disproving our hypothesis for a research, but it also could be a source for strength and power. Imagine or not imagine, here is a case study about a language that was spoken in the North American region and is not spoken anymore. Most of the speakers don't speak it. It's a dormant language, or rather it is a sleeping language, as many of them want to call it. This community lost its language through a process of oppression, not because of a choice, but through a process of oppression. And that has created a major social impact in the community. Most of the community members, as the book and as other descriptions make it clear, go through various challenges, and one of the challenges include physical and mental ailments. So in such situation, the community also faced, unfortunately, a very high number of suicide rates. So the community wanted to come together, find source and power to stay together and to face the oppression that they face in today's time. So they, not surprisingly, turned back to a documentation that was done in 1918 by an anthropologist and stored in an archive. So that was an analog documentation. It was stored in an archive, and when it was taken back, it was original field notes and transcriptions. When it was taken back, it was put into the form of a book by a native speaker, and the book is called They Remember Me Still. They Remember Me Still is basically a collection of 13 traditional Penobocos tales, okay, of the tribe's cultural hero. They are going to be, the person is going to be called Gulseb. Together speak of greater power. So this book speaks of a greater power as a community, and it talks and it revives the myth of its cultural hero to face the modern day challenges of the community. And this has actually had a good mental health impact on the community. And since the inception of the book and since the inception of a language revitalization movement based on a data that was collected almost 100 years back, they have able to revive not just their language, also their well-being. Now that is the power of language, or that is the power of data in language documentation. I don't want to call it documentation. That's the power of data on the challenges that we are facing, okay, in the context of a loss of language. Okay. And another interesting effect is also that language documentation data can also be a major source for language maintenance efforts. Now, another story from Dr. Chelaya's book, Professor Chelaya's book. It is about the Unan oral traditions project. They collected over 347 recordings of stories and songs. Now, these items are recorded and are available over multiple archives, so including ILA, another famous archive in the North American context. Now, based on this collection, they are able to deliver a sketch grammar, a 5,000-word dictionary. They have managed to train community members in language documentation and archiving. A curriculum for school or a language teaching at the school level has been created, and a creation of a keyboard was also possible through this data that is stored in an archive. So the data that is stored in an archive has multiple lives that we don't think of. For us as linguists and as anthropologists, the data is there to prove or disprove a particular hypothesis. At the end, it is also for comparison across multiple languages, and that's all. We don't really bother about data much beyond that. But for the community members, the data is much more valuable than it is valuable to us. It is a source of strength and power, as I just discussed before, and it is also a source for language revival movements. So this power of data is something that we don't often experience. It's experienced only by the native community members and by the native speakers, and not by the linguist. So we should be very mindful of the role or the life of a data, rather a life. I don't want to use the word afterlife. Once you produce the data and then you exhaust your research question, we don't really bother about it. But it sorts of take a new life after our research question. So data has a role outside our research question, outside our research project. So one of the major aspects of documentation is the documentation supports language learning activity, literacy activity. In India, especially among the Bodo communities in Assam, documentation, and not just in Assam, not just among Bodo, even among Dimasa, especially in Assam, documentation or the data from documentation project is leading towards building a literacy project and also standardizing writing system. Apart from that, data from endangered languages, especially what I call as data as linguistic data from endangered languages, have led ethnobotanists understand and discover especially new species, especially botanical species. Now, here is a community that I've closely worked with. The Toda communities, the knowledge of the Toda community has been used by a local anthropologist come a dentist called Tarun Chabra to discover a new plant species or a new flower species called Impatiens cavtaean. Now, the cavtaean is the native name given to the hill in which the flower is found, and it is now part of the official scientific name. So it has been an approved part of the official scientific name. And another thing that we have found from Indian communities is that the practice of millet cultivation is now being revived in many central Indian regions. And for a long time, this practice of millet cultivation was restricted only to the Gond communities, especially in the central India. And it is from understanding the agricultural practices and documenting the agricultural practices that we have been able to revive multiple species of millets that have been used. So one study says that Gond community alone had 56 varieties of millets. And probably I'm wrong in the number, there was more, but at least one community could identify 56 varieties of millet that the Gond community used to cultivate for their nutritional benefits. Now these are all being revived as we started to document their practices. Another interesting ethnozoological innovation that discovery that happened is finding out a small frog called Kadar burrowing frog. Now the Kadar is a community, a tribal community living in the Kerala region. It is through the help of this community's native knowledge, what is data for us and what is native knowledge for them. It is through this traditional knowledge that we were able, especially the botanists, the zoologists were able to discover and describe a new frog species. This is called as Kadar burrowing frogs. Now, as I told you, data for us as linguists is only for linguistic theory, is only for our research question. But data for a native speaker is much more beyond that. It is a source of strength and a source of revival, their efforts to revive the language. And for many other fields, it is also a source for multiple ways of seeing the world. For example, this ethnobotanical innovation that the Toda community helped discover was actually understood by Tarun Chabra while documenting their language, culture, and ritual structure. Now, while such documentation, Dr. Tarun Chabra happened to come across a name of a flower in the Toda language, and when he asked where it can be found, the people pointed out to him the place where it is there and at what season it will be there. And based on this information, he went and he documented for the first time the species of flower. The same happened with Kadar burrowing frogs. People, the Kadar community informed the zoologist and the botanist that there are such frogs, and this frog is different from other varieties of burrowing frogs, and you should look at that. Now, it is this knowledge is what we are going to lose when you're going to lose a language. Now, all this data is not just helpful for linguists and native speakers, but it's also helpful for different other practitioners and academicians. Now, hence, the data that is responsible for so much use must be handled with care. It is a very vital resource. Okay. Now, that's what I was trying to say. The data is a very vital resource and it has multiple usage. Now, where do these vital resources go and how do we protect them? Now, or how do we preserve them? Not protect them, I want to use the word preserve them. How do we preserve them? So one of the places where we save and preserve our data is in a place called language archives. Archives maintain and provide access to records of enduring value. Let's just see the word record right now and let's just stick to it. For a while, I'll come back and describe what is a record. Traditionally, archiving was considered as an end of a career activity. That is a professor who is going to retire. Before the professor retires, she collects all the data that she has collected, and then she will make a deposit either in her own library or in a regional archive that is accessible to her, and then she will donate it as gifts to the archives. So this is often considered as an end of a career activity, where materials, including primarily of written materials, especially of lexical text, lexical list, text, and file slips, and as technology processed, wax cylinders, vinyl recorders, and magnetic tapes were given as donations to the archives, and then they were kept there. So they were kept and they were treated as physical objects. They were not really treated as language data per se. So that was the traditional archiving method. But even that was very useful. The 1918 example that we just saw, the Pembrokeshire Coast example that we just saw, is from such an archive. So the university there decided to protect and preserve these data, for a longer time, and it is from that preservation activity that the community is able to revive their culture. Now, similarly, the modern day archiving, through a traditional day archiving, also invests a lot of time in storing, preserving, and distributing vast amount of linguistic data, but they are slightly different from the traditional practice. Here, modern day language archiving is not considered as an end career activity, but as such, it is sort of a progressive activity. So as soon as you collect data, you do some sort of enrichment, and then you deposit the data into the archives. So it is sort of an activity that is planned into your project design, and it happens along with your project, and it happens parallelly with your other activities of your project, like data illustration, data analysis, data submissions into archives are also another parallel task that we do today. That's how most of the endangered language documentation archives are understood. Okay, so modern endangered language archive, most of the language archives today are endangered language archives, not really language archives. So we don't find a lot of information about Hindi, English, Tamil in these special kinds of archives. The archives that I'm going to talk about are archives like LR, Endangered Language Archive, or DOBES, the language archive, which is again hosted by the Max Planck Institute, or CORSAL, in which MAS is deposited. Now, all these archives are archives that are specifically designed or specifically meant for endangered languages, but they can also have materials from major dominant languages as well. But archives especially started with endangered languages, and the same principles and the same practices that we do for archiving endangered languages are the same principles and practice we will do for majority languages as well. So the practice and the procedures are not going to change. So they are the same. So that's why I put the bracket endangered. So there are the language archive might contain languages that are not endangered per se. Okay, they may be minor, but they're not endangered. So I don't want to really reduce them to endangered language archives. They are language archives. So the language archive is sort of a digital facility that has been established with the primary goal of preserving digital data. Unlike the traditional archive, which whose primary goal was to preserve physical objects, okay, wordless on a sheet of paper, text written on a piece of notebook, okay. File slips are slips, paper slips, or wax cylinders are actual wax cylinders. These are real wax cylinders. If time provides, I will share some of the wax cylinder photos with you, or vinyl records or magnetic tapes. These are actual physical objects. So people were more interested in the physical object. But today we are not interested in the physical object. We are interested in the digital data. We are interested in digitizing even those physical objects and preserving them. So it is sort of a digital repository that specializes in holding lasting multi-purpose record of a language. Okay, so this is Himmelmann's definition: lasting multi-purpose record of a language. So what is a language archive? A language archive is sort of a digital repository that is interested in hosting a lasting multi-purpose record of a language. As we just saw in the earlier slides, the data has role outside linguistics, and those roles are numerous. So that means our data should be a multi-purpose record, and it should be, and multiple or people from different disciplines should also be able to access our record along with the community members. So that's what the main motive of a language archive is. Now, so language archive, done in the sense, what it does is it stores, preserves, and distributes vast amount of linguistic information. That's what a language archive does. Now, what are submitted into a language archive? So we just saw, let me just go back to the first definition. Archives maintain and provide access to records. Now, what is submitted into a language archive, or what is found in a language archives, are called records. A record is a document or information that has been fixed on some medium. Now it can be a paper. It would have been the paper for the traditional archives, but for a digital archive, it is going to be digital data. It's going to be digital objects like files, like MP3 files, WAV files, PDF files, or text files. Okay. Now now these objects are preserved along with the content. Okay. Sometimes in the traditional archives, we are worried about the structural integrity. We are not worried about the content. Okay. But here in the digital archives, we are worried about the content, context, the structure. All of this is used to preserve. We are trying to understand, we are trying to preserve not just the object, digital object. We are trying to preserve the content that is in the digital object. We are trying to preserve the context in which the digital object is created. And we are also trying to preserve the structure of the digital object as such. Now, why do we do this? It is sort of an extension of our human memory, okay, and to demonstrate accountability. So one of the major things that archives can do in endangered language studies, especially, is that when you are going to say a particular sound is, let's say, a voiceless lateral. A voiceless lateral is a very marked sound. If you're going to say something is a voiceless lateral, and you say that this language has voiceless lateral, and you want to prove it, your proof will become much more simpler and much more easier for others to understand if you point to a place where it is stored. And if you say that these are the examples in the language, any of you are welcome to take the examples and analyze it, and you will come to the same conclusion as I did. Now, this sorts of increases the scientificity of our study itself. So in language, especially in language description, in the earlier past, what we used to do is that we used to only give a description at the articulatory level, and we do not supplement it with recordings. Today, when we start supplementing it with recordings, we provide phonetic pictures. Now, along with phonetic pictures, imagine if you give in your article with a click of a button, it will lead you back to the place where those data are. It is basically going to increase our accountability. Falsifiable conditions is going to get much better. So we are creating scopes for falsifying our work. The more falsifiable a work is, the better it is in terms of scientific principles. So now such scopes are also created by language archives. Now, in case of endangered language archives, so what do we submit in them? We submit records that include materials regardless of mediums on basically primary data, what I would call as audio-visual recording. These are going to be audio-visual recording, notes, and sometimes phonetic photographs. Okay, then there are going to be documents which are going to be basically on target language as well as on secondary language. So people could have written down a list of words in the target language. For example, if there is a script, a native transcription, an IPA transcription, probably a draft of analysis, okay, and translation. All these materials are going to be submitted in the language archives today. Okay, so we are all going to make this deposit regardless of the medium. It will take, and then it will convert it into a digital object. If you're going to give them as an analog object, a language archive today will ask you either to apply for a grant to convert it into a digital archive, or you will be converting it into a digital archive and submitting it in a language archive. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. Who uses a language archive? As I told you, researchers, not just linguists, many researchers from multiple fields, community members, journalists who also started to use language archives, especially journalists who are interested in language diversity, and journalists who are interested in, as one example that I wanted to talk about, is the recently, if you have been watching the international media, you would have come across a news about a huge discovery, especially a discovery of significant nature in the North American context, is a discovery of an unmarked grave of number of peoples in a residential school building. Now, this residential school building used to basically be a school for the indigenous tribal communities in the North American continent, and this unmarked grave has sort of triggered a lot of painful memories among the indigenous community of North America. Now, when journalists started to write about it, they are interested in indigenous languages, not just indigenous languages. They're interested in indigenous languages, narrating about their painful experience with the residential schools. And many of the journalists have actually used, at least 2 articles that I've read, actually used data from an endangered language archive, quoting such narrations that are available there. And it doesn't just stop there. These days, artificial intelligence and machines are also interested in that data that are available in endangered language archives, especially machines that are interested or groups that are interested in developing artificial intelligence and natural language processing for human speech are interested in understanding human language more, and then they want their machines to automatically read materials in the archives and develop better algorithms for artificial intelligence, machine learning capacities, and many other future endeavors. So those that are also not named are also possible. Okay, so the usages are all not restricted. These are things that we know of today, but in the future, because when the anthropologist documented Pentecost data, he never thought that his data will be a source for strength in the community 100 years in the future. That was never thought, or that was never imagined. So that is what is going to be the role of a data. We won't know what the role of the data is going to be in the future. Now, we are trying to create thus a sort of a time machine. We are going to create a sort of a time machine that will be opened in the future. And in the future also, the pieces in the time machine, or the pieces in the time box, let us call it a time box, will be accessible to them. So we are trying to then create an archive which is much more accessible, not just for people right now, but also for people in the future. In that context, data is then a very vital aspect. So we are going to pay more attention in this workshop on linguistic data management. Okay, and we are going to learn how to do the data management per se. And one part of data management is metadata. So that we will be spending more time on that, but we'll also be learning other aspects of data management as a whole, not just as one metadata. We'll be learning data management as a whole, so that we can organize our research data much more mindfully, and we can present this much more mindfully, and we can also at the same time hope that our data will be used in the future for aspects that we have never thought of. So that's the most important thing. So data management is often described as managing data as a valuable, vital resource. It involves the practice of collecting, keeping, using, and reusing data in an effective and efficient way. In this workshop, so we will learn to develop linguistic data management plan to help us in language documentation and archiving projects. That is my main motive, but this principles that you're going to learn will be useful for all purposes. So let's do a sort of a warm-up activity. Okay, so all of you who have data at present with them, you're going to do, from your data, you're going to create a list. You're going to create a list of what you have, what type of data you have. Do you have audio, video, text, spreadsheet, Word documents, etc.? What do you have? You're going to create the list. For each type, you're going to tell me what is the extension of the file. Okay, so each file will have an extension, and you're also going to tell me what is the size of the file. Is it okay? For those of you who do not have a data, I have already shared with you the data set for the workshop. It is a very fun data set. So if you have already downloaded, you must have realized it is a pop culture data set and not really a language data set. Okay, now use that data set and create this inventory for me and share it with me. How long do you think I should give you time? How long should we spend for this?
Karthik, can you tell me one more time what exactly are we supposed to do?
Yes.
What's the exercise? Yeah.
So if you have your own data, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to create an inventory. Basically, you're going to create a list of the number of audio files you have, the number of video files you have, the number of text files you have, the number of spreadsheets you have. So you're basically going to create a sort of a list inventory based on the type. Okay, make a list of different type of data you have. So for example, if you have audio data, you will say I have audio data and this many number of audio data. If you have video data, if you have video recordings, you are going to say that I have 4 video recordings or 5 video recordings. If you have text files, notepad files, you're going to call it text files. Now text files include notepad files. Let's stick to notepad files for now. And you'll have spreadsheets for people who use who does acoustics and other stuff. You will have spreadsheet and you will have Word documents. So you're going to basically create an inventory for me based on the data that you have with you already. You are most welcome to use your own data for this exercise. It'll be very helpful for us in the future. If not, use the data set that I created. Okay. After this inventory is created, you are going to list down the extensions. So what are the file formats? Now file formats are called as extensions. Now if you remember, .pdf is an extension. I want you to note the extensions of your files, of your data, or sometimes ALAC, ALC, or sometimes OGG, or sometimes 3GP. Okay, and in video files you sometimes may have a MP4, M4A, or basically MP4 and M4A, or sometimes FLV. Okay, I want such file extensions to be noted down, and along with the file extensions, also note down the number of, or the size, what is the total number of files that you have, and also the size, what is the approximate size of the files. So for example, if I have sent you 5 video files, you have to tell me that there are 5 video files in your data set, and you have to tell me what is the approximate size. Is it okay? Have I made it clear?
Yeah.
Are there others who want me to make it clear again? So let me go from this slide. Let me stop sharing the slide. Let me go back to a Word document. Okay, chat. There's a message in the chat. Okay, for some weird reason I'm unable to. Okay. 3 schools now.
Yeah, the Canada wala thingy that you were talking about.
Oh yeah.
It's 3 schools.
Yeah,
now.
it's 3 schools now. Yeah.
So by every day there is some news from over there.
Yes, it is.
Initially it was 250 bodies. Now then the second one had 750, and today itself they uncovered another one which had 180 bodies.
Oh, it's a painful.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's really painful.
And especially because on Instagram there is this First Nation influencer, not influencer. She basically just talks about her own experiences. So she was also, it was very emotional when I saw that for the first time. Anyway, back to work.
Yeah. So let me share you another screen where the activities on the activities listed on the screen. Can you all see the activity again now listed on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So do any of you have trouble in understanding the activity? Have you all downloaded the data set, or do any of you have a trouble with downloading the data set? If so, please raise your hand so that I can
No, I think we're all set. We're all okay.
No, there are 2 hands raised. So
Okay,
I'm
1, 2.
Okay. So yes, Anmesha, are you part of the Google Classroom, Anmesha?
Yes, sir. Actually, I downloaded the dataset. I raised hand by mistake.
Okay.
Sorry, sir.
Oh, no issues. Then I'll lower the hand. Ibtisam,
Sir, yes, sir. I have downloaded a dataset. Sorry, it's not opening.
It's not opening. You're on a mobile phone or on a?
So I'm on a mobile phone.
You're on a mobile phone. Okay. Zip files. Do you have a zip file extractor on your mobile? It needs an app. A zip app, a zip extractor. You need a zip extractor app.
Okay, sir,
For
that's
those
why I
of
have
you, okay. For the meantime, I'll share the data set online. So for this activity, you can just see. Seeing is enough, right? I believe.
Okay.
Sir, even I'm facing the problem with downloading the zip format. So
Just 1 minute. I'm doing it. So I'm coming out here. Okay, so you will be able to see my screen where I'm sharing the data set. Can all of you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for so while you do this activity on the background, it will be very helpful if you can actually download a zip extractor for your mobile. Is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay. So Najima, the files that you're talking about, are they your files? Sorry, I stopped sharing. Just 1 minute, I'm resharing it. Yes, Najima, can you hear me? Najima, do you have any? That's a response to your. That's a response to the assignment, Najima. Is that what you have typed? Yes.
So
who's that?
I don't understand what exactly I have to send. I just answer the questions like I have Word file, and then the file extension is .doc, and I have 4 files containing the size 16.0 KB, 19.
Yes, Najima. That's exactly what I wanted. But do you have other types of data apart from Word document?
No, sir. Till now, I don't.
Okay, then you also use the data set to begin with.
So should I have to send my data?
No. You need not send your data. I want only something like this typed out on the sheet or written out on a sheet. Yeah.
Yes.
So now you also please use my data set, the data set that I just shared with you, okay, to create this sort of a inventory of your data.
Okay, sir.
Hi, Karthik.
Yes. Who's
Bharat
this?
this side.
Yeah, Bharat. Yes, Bharat. Just one doubt. Just 1 minute, Bharat. Just one question about Zoom. Can't I see the screen while I talk? The Zoom screen?
How do you mean?
As in like in Google Meet, where I have the video on one side and the
you have to go upper top right corner view and do side by side speaker.
Okay, wait. Let me just
in your Zoom screen. In your Zoom screen, go top and side by side speaker.
Yeah, okay. Let me just do that. Let me just stop sharing and then I'll do it and then. Oh, that I understood. No, but I want to share my screen and also see the participants in the same time.
Also see the participants. So uske liye what you have to do is you go to view and then you start sharing your screen. I'll tell you.
Wait, let me just.
First of all, let me spotlight you for everyone so that you are in the middle for everyone, and whatever you share, that is in the middle for everyone as well. And if anybody unmutes themselves, I would like to request all of you to please mute yourself again, because otherwise it creates disturbance. Okay, so now what are you seeing right now in your screen?
I'm seeing the folder and a small pop-up box. Basically, the pop-up box is
is you.
Yeah, no, is many other people. It's not just me. I can go through, but can't I make the pop-up box a bit bigger?
Yeah. Just make the stretch it. Or if you can put it in full screen, if you put your Zoom in full screen, then it will become embedded together, and then you can have half of your screen. You can have your shared screen, and on the other half you can see the participants.
That's exactly what I want.
Go to the full, make everything full screen first.
Okay, I think I am unable to do it because I'm on Ubuntu.
Oh.
I am not on Mac or. Why?
Why Ubuntu?
Why are you guys on Windows and Mac? I should ask
no
the question.
idea. No, I have no idea. No, that's why, as in enlighten us. Because
I will talk about it later. We'll talk about that later.
If there's any privacy thing in Google and all, I'm going to uninstall immediately.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I have a lot of issues. Let me not go there. I have a lot of issues with Mac as well as Windows, but I would still go with Mac, given a chance. Not with Windows. So someone has chat. Do we have to share information here or in PC? Okay, Samhita, if you're done, okay, can you? Okay, for others,
What happened? Why are you on mute? I suddenly cannot hear. Suddenly, I cannot hear you. Is it my computer? Can everybody else hear him?
Yes, ma'am. No one is able to hear him.
Yeah. Did you put in
Madhuri,
your
मुझे भी नहीं सुनाई पड़ रहा.
I think his headphones plugged in might have been.
Did
my
you...
headphones. Okay, let me just.
Now it's okay. Now it's clear.
Now it's clear.
Okay. What was happening?
Yeah, that's okay. That's technology is still not perfect everywhere. Okay, so for those of you who still need my screen to be shared, okay, let me try and send you an image if possible of all the data. Screen.
I will share the screen. Should I share the screen of the data?
Yes. Yeah. That is better. So if you can see the screen, share the screen of the data, it will be better. And I want to see the others here. Okay. So while Madhuri shares the data, is there anyone who has completed the task?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Other than me, of course.
Yeah, I'll come back to you later. I know you will be able to do it. Sorry, I'll come back to you later. Others, have others done the inventory exercise?
Yes.
Those who have done the inventory exercise. Okay, Bipasha. So you did it on a computer?
Yes.
Can you share your screen? Madhuri, there's no need to share the screen now.
Okay.
Yeah, Bipasha,
Okay.
can you share the screen?
Okay, give me a moment. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Samir ji, Dr. Samir, is there any, your hand is raised. Is there any questions that you want to ask us?
Download the file.
Okay. Dr. Samir, are you on a mobile phone or on your desktop?
I'm on my laptop. Yeah.
You're on your laptop.
Yeah.
Did you access the Google Classroom? Have you been able to access the Google Classroom? Let me just check. Yes, Samir. Dr. Samir, you are on the Google Classroom, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you find the zip file there?
Yeah. I have found.
What screen are you getting? Can you share your screen first? Bipasha, just hold on for a while. Dr. Samir, please share your screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's saying that participants are not allowed to see share the screen. Okay.
I will give the permissions now. Just give me a minute. I'm enabling the permissions now. Yeah, it's allowed. Samir, Dr. Samir, please share your screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Samir. Just click on this. On the top right side, do you see 3 dots?
Yeah.
Please click on that. Open in new window. Okay, Dr. Samir. Now you should be able to see the download icon on the right side, on the right corner. Just 1 minute, Dr. Samir. Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you see the download icon? Yes,
Yeah,
please.
Okay.
Yes, you should be able to download now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Samir. Bipasha, sir, you can please, Dr. Samir, please unshare. Yeah, Bipasha, you can share now. Okay. So this is the inventory. This is a list of files. Can you tell me how many JPEG files are there?
5.
JPG.
There is two JPEG, 3 JPG file.
Okay. So image files are 5. Am I right?
Yeah. There is 5 image files.
Bipasha ji, Bipasha,
Yeah.
sorry for this. Okay. Can you just go ahead and create a new, just this okay. On the column G, on the column G, write images. Just anywhere. Column G, write images.
Images, okay, yeah.
Images. Okay, how many images are there?
I found 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
4.
Yes, I see
Let me just.
4. I may
just
be
say
wrong.
write 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm also looking at the data again. There are 5 images, if I'm not wrong. Okay. So
okay, maybe I got some file as a wrong extension. Maybe.
That's
yeah.
okay. So write image 5.
5. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what is the total size of the image? To do the total, to find out the total size of the image, okay, it is very simple. Or go to your Windows file again and select all the image files together. Bipasha ji, it will be good if you can unshare and reshare your folder for us.
Okay, yeah.
Have others found out what is the total size of the images?
Karthik, I don't think I'll be able to do it. I've not got the size. How to do it? How do I figure out the size?
Just click on each image. Control and click each image. So if you reshare your screen with,
yeah.
Now right click and go to properties. Do you find it? So I've just shared my screen here. Okay. My screen looks different because I'm not on a Windows or on a Mac. I'm on Ubuntu, so it looks different, slightly not very different from Windows users and slightly similar to Mac users. So on the total, there are 5 images here in the inventory.
Yeah.
Okay. So each images are almost the images together. So I'm selecting the images together. I'm clicking on my properties and my property window is opened and it says there are the total image. You can't see, do you see my property window?
Karthik, can you help me one thing? I think it's beyond your talk, but how to download the things from my drive to my computer?
Oh, okay. Share the screen
That I
again.
didn't do actually. So
yeah. Share the screen.
No, just a minute. Yeah, is it visible?
Not yet. Yes, now it is. Just come to dataset zipped. That's okay. You come to dataset zipped. Yes, click on that. Right click. Download should be there as one of the options at the bottom.
Yes, it's there. Yeah. Meanwhile, somebody else can share
Yes.
and show.
Madhuri, you're on a Windows? Or as Ajay, have you done the work? Maz is on a train, so has anyone else completed the inventory work? Has anyone completed the inventory work?
I am so sorry. I was completely on mute. I was answering you, but I was like, Anyway, मैं ये कह रही थी कि I did do the inventory work, but once I saw Bipasha's, I realized I had to do it for every single file. So what I did was I just wrote video, 5 files, this file, that file,
That's enough. That's enough. That's enough. That is also enough.
Oh, okay.
Just can you share it with me?
1 second. I was beginning to do the other thingy. 1 second. I haven't written the sizes yet because I was. क्या कहते हैं? हाँ. So
yes,
this,
ma'am, you are supposed to
I was
say
starting
something.
to do is. Okay. Can you see it? So video,
Yes.
image, text, documents. Then there was one untitled document which also I have written.
Okay. What is untitled documents?
The size is 0 KB. The untitled document ka size is 0 KB. The others I was calculating abhi when you asked me to share the ye. Should I share
Yes,
the
ma'am.
folder?
No, 1 minute. Ma'am, you were supposed to say Kavita, ma'am.
What is the difference between JPEG and JPG file?
Well, JPEG and JPG file are both the same. So when convention was prepared, they prepared 2 convention, one called JPEG, but they realized that it is a 4-letter instead of a 3-letter convention.
Okay.
So then they replaced with JPG. That's all. So it's both of them are the same, but they coexist with each other.
Thank you.
Okay, the size. Yeah, now can you share the screen, Madhuri?
The whole folder?
Yeah, the whole folder screen.
Okay. 1 second. All right. Can you see?
Yes, I can. Okay. Can you minimize the bit? Can you unzoom a bit?
Unzoom? Unzoom
Yeah,
as
control and scroll down. Hold control. Hold control and scroll up and down.
I don't know why it's not happening.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. No issues. So
We can share that if you want.
No, it's okay, ma'am. Just go and organize by type. Can you see here by type?
Yeah.
You want to organize the files by type? No, that's okay. That's okay.
This is what you want, right?
Okay. On the top, just 1 minute. Just on the top, all of you are on a computer. If you're on a Windows, on the top, do you see name? The column called name under which the names are listed.
Yeah.
Click on the name once for me. Can you see now it has been alphabetically arranged? Now move from that column to date modified. Date modified is the same, so there's going to be no difference. Now click on type. All the PDFs are together. Then all the JPEG files are together. And then you can similarly click on size, and then it will be rearranged as per size.
Take.
Yeah. So okay. Now just select all the text files, text documents in the type called text documents. Select all the text documents together. Right click. Open properties. You should be able to see the total number of
total size.
Yeah, total size for the text files.
This one.
Yeah, we can't see, but I'm sure the rest of them are able to see it too. So it should be around 6 KB.
5 KB.
5 KB? It should be 6.
4.61.
Okay, 4.61. Okay.
That's the TXT files, not the PDFs.
Yes. So similarly, now I want for all the other types. Can you just do the listing, the inventory? We'll just build the
Yeah,
inventory.
just quickly. Text files are how many?
4.61. Can all of you also note it down?
KB.
Yes, yes, I have downloaded.
Okay, thank you.
Image files are properties 634 KB.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Video files.
Okay, is there anyone who has trouble still getting the data? Because this data, let's stick to this data for the whole exercise. All of you stick to the data for the whole workshop. Throughout the workshop, we will stick to this data. Is it okay?
Yeah, I think okay.
So that will be easy for all of us to be doing the same steps, so we can share. One of you can share, and then others can learn from your peers. So that's the intention here. So we will stick to the data. Is it okay? Have all of you got the data? Is there anyone who doesn't have the data downloaded? Please raise your hand.
It's 96.8 MB. Okay. Videos are 96.8. Yeah, okay.
Okay, now share the spreadsheet again.
Oh. Here.
Okay. So this is sort of an inventory that we created of the data set that we have with this. Of the data set that we have 5 image files. We have 5 text documents, that is text files. We have 5 PDF documents, if I'm not wrong. Okay. And then we have 5 video files, right? Now there is one file called untitled file, and its extension is also called file, if I'm not wrong. What is extension is?
The untitled, yeah, file, and there's a squiggly line.
Yeah. Okay. Just write it as file. That's all. It's basically a type of unknown nature. Okay. And it's an extract file. It's basically a trash file. I deleted and it is there. That's all. Okay. So this is what we call as an inventory. If someone is going to ask me, what is your inventory of data? You're going to say, I'm going to have 100 image files. I have 100 audio files. I have 100 text files. I have 100, let's say, video files. Now that sort of saying the numbers and telling me the size will give me the inventory of your collection. Now this is called a collection for you. Let us just call it now. You have downloaded this, all of you have downloaded this as a folder, right? So none of you have downloaded as individual files. Now we need the whole folder for the exercise. Now you are going to learn to organize this data. Is there any way to organize the data that you guys already have? Can we think of organizing this data? Is there any method to organize the data?
How do you mean organize? Because I think when we did the type and all by sorting by type, wasn't it organized like that way?
Yes, that is one way. Is there another way of organizing the data?
Maybe we can put a pie chart or something, to show the size.
No, not this. Not with the. So Madhuri, if I'm just sharing the screen now.
Stop. I'll stop share.
I did
Kartik, in the meantime, I have a question.
Yes.
In case we have a different extension for video or any other things, like we have segregated documents into Word file, text file, and PDF. Likewise, do we need to segregate between MP4 and WAV file?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Okay. Text file will be one category, and under that category, you will say you have files from text as one extension, PDF as another extension. Okay. So similarly, if you have more than one video extension .mov, .mp4 and .flv, then you will say you will have these as video files extensions. You will just comma and do it. That's all. Okay, this is for you to organize the data. So one way of organizing the data is to understand that we can organize the data as by its type. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen now. Now another way, are there other ways of organizing the data?
Yeah, by
I
size.
think
By size, yes. Anyone
I'm so
else?
sorry.
Yes.
Someone else was talking.
Who was that?
no, actually, Bharat this side.
Yeah, yes, Bharat. Sorry, I'm not able to see
Bharat.
who is talking here. That's why.
No issues. Actually, current went off. No issues. For the data which I'm looking at, they are the names of the movies. So we can make a folder of the different movies and we can put the data of text, PDF or MP4s in that.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, is there any principle of organizing the data that we are going to use? Now, what is data? First, let me just ask you what is data, and then we'll talk about the different types of data we have. Now, at a philosophical level, data is a thing, things that are known or assumed as facts. Okay, from which we can do other sorts of work, especially from which we can base our reason or our calculation. Okay, now data is basically a thing from which we derive other works. So that's what this data is all about. So in a narrow sense, data is a collection of numerical or textual observation which can be cleaned, processed, used, analyzed for many purposes. For example, to test hypothesis or to make visual displays. Okay, within documentation, we can classify data into two very distinct classes of resources. That one is going to be direct recordings of event, and other is going to be a derivation from the direct recording. Now, the direct recording of the events are going to be called as primary data, and the derivations are going to be called as secondary data. Now, the primary data are going to be your raw audio video files, okay, or written observations in the old school of spoken or signed language that are used for analysis, including narratives, oral histories, illustration, experimental protocols, even psycholinguistic test results. Okay, and second data are going to be transcriptions, translations, morpheme breakdowns, glosses, and other types of annotations that are require some level of preliminary analysis to create them. So a transcription is basically an analysis. Would all of you agree with me?
So all of you agree that even a transcription is a secondary data, not a primary one.
Yes. So the transcription is based on the real event, right?
Okay.
The real,
yeah.
So you're basing on the real event, you are making a transcription. So it's a derivation. Okay, but this said, the distinction between primary and secondary data is not really that useful for us. Okay, so it's just an example of how we can categorize it. How this is especially Himanmal's way of categorization. So I'm just talking about it to understand that there can be this sort of two difference in categorizing data. So one is going to be called as primary data, raw data that is unprocessed, and other that is going to be processed data, basically data on which we have done some form of an analysis. Okay, now that is going to be called as secondary data. Transcription, translation, morpheme breaks, glosses, and any other information on to produce any other information you have done small analysis, even a minor analysis, is called as secondary data. Okay, now there are two principles of organizing data. Now one principle is going to be called as original order. Now original order is going to be a principle, or a group of records should be maintained in the same order, as they were placed by the record creator. Okay, now this is a principle that is very useful in archiving, but this is a principle that is not very helpful for us in endangered language archives, or in language documentation, or in any other linguistic work. We need not necessarily organize as it is placed. So for example, if I just sent it to you, I just shared it with you through the internet, and that order is not a very convenient order. Am I right? Is that a very convenient order? So ma'am is nodding no.
No,
yeah. Yes, no, that is not a very convenient order. Bharat really gave a hint where we can order it. These are all movies, so we can order them together. All the movie files, we can put it together. Now that is called as principle of provenance. Now the principle of provenance states that records created by a single organization or person, or during the course of a single activity, be kept together and distinct from each other. So all these movies are single activity or a single event, So records created from these movies then should be kept together in one folder or in one unit. Does that make sense?
Kinda. So
Yes.
let's say, can I can interrupt, no?
Yeah, please. Absolutely.
If I have recorded a set of data in one day, I can keep it as that day. So I can categorize it as day one or whatever the date is, and all the data which I have collected on that day, be it images or video and anything, that can go under that one folder.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Now that's exactly what we're trying to do. So in fact, I want one more subdivision in that folder. Okay, we are going to do that's the exercise that we are going to do right now. One more subdivision in that folder in which I don't want the data that are from two different events. I don't want data from two different events mixed. I want data from different events kept differently. Okay, for example, in one day you have recorded two events. One is going to be, let's say you're recording a marriage ceremony in a particular community. In the first part of the record day, you have recorded the actual marriage ceremony, and in the second part of the day, you have actually recorded some sort of a ceremony that follows the marriage ceremony. Okay. Now, for example, in an Indian wedding, after the marriage, the bride or the groom moves into the new home. Okay. Now that is another event, and the marriage itself is another event. Now these are two different events, so I want them even within one day to be separated as separate. You got my point, Madhuri, and the rest?
Yep.
Okay. Are there others who have not been able to understand this? The principle of provenance states that a resource created from a single activity should be kept together. So, for example, in a single day, you are recording a marriage ceremony. So, for a while, let us all become a marriage photographer and a videographer. So, in that day, we are recording the marriage ceremony and also another event. For example, the event where the bride or the grooms, depending on the community, goes into the in-laws house. Okay. Now, these are two different activities. One is the marriage itself. Okay, the other is the bride or the groom going into the in-laws house. Now you are recording both these events in two different time intervals. Am I right?
Yeah.
And these are two different activities. Am I right? So items produced or records created from these two different activities has to be kept distinct from each other. Understood? Yeah. So is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is going to be the thing that we are going to understand. So that we will have to do, and then we are going to move on further from here and to something called as organizational units. So now you also, all of you, this is just a vocabulary that you're going to learn. Okay, there are going to be multiple vocabularies for all this. Now I'm going to start from the bottom of the hierarchy and move up. Now a resource in this context is a unique object, either a physical item or a computer file comprising part of documentation of a language. So a photograph that you clicked of the marriage ceremony is basically a resource, a file that is going to be at the bottom of the hierarchy. Okay, then often multiple resources are going to be clubbed together to create a session. Okay, the multiple recordings can be called an audio recording, a transcription, and a photograph. Now they are all going to be clubbed together to call a session, and these sessions are now going to be collected in the form of a particular event. Now we are going to call the particular event as, let's say, marriage ceremony. Now that is going to be called as corpus. Okay, now from the corpus we move up into another category which is called as collection. So you are going to submit a collection called marriage ceremony in a language or a marriage ceremony in a community. Okay, that's going to be called a collection. And an assemblage is going to be all the data that is created, a sum total of all materials, not just data, all primary and secondary objects that have been created is going to be called as an assemblage. Okay, it is all the files that you have created throughout your project. This is called as assemblage. Is it okay? These are the basic terms that we are using. Now I will have an example here. Can you see an example here? Okay, now this is now you're going to write a workflow, okay, for organizing your data. Now, one thing that I'm going to ask you to do throughout this is to write this workflow throughout. I will show you an example of a workflow at the end of the workshop today. But I want you to document what you're doing so that it builds transparency into it, and also it creates it also makes it easy for you to follow the convention. So here in Sikkim, what we did is that we went for a fieldwork in a language called Gurung. So the folder is called Gurung. Under Gurung, we created two types of collections. One is called main collection and another is called a pilot collection. This is basically main fieldwork and pilot fieldwork collection. Under main fieldwork collection, as Madhuri just pointed out, we created dates, okay, and then we arranged the data. And under the date, what we did is to arrange the files as per the types. Now this is a raw data that we are processing. So we wanted to segregate the audio files from the image, text, and the video. And under the videos and under the audios, you can see all the audio listed here. Am I right? Okay. Now what we did is we wrote down this very clearly. Now another thing that I'm going to share with you is the workflow that we have created, or the data management plan we have. Okay. So I'm going to share it with you, and then we are trying to write this sort of a data management workflow through this exercise. That's what we are going to do. So I'm opening it, and then I'm sharing it now. Can you all see the workflow now? Okay, so this is a document called Data Management and Processing for Endangered Language Documentation, a workflow. This is created for the Sikkim project. This is specifically written for the Center for Endangered Language, Sikkim University. So here I have created a section called Saving the Raw Files folder structure. And then I clearly discussed about how to do that. Okay, and I've documented the process of doing it. So language name, pilot or main, date, folder as per media types, and the files. Can you all see it? Okay, now this is a sort of an activity that you're going to do. This is your homework 1. Okay, so one method through which you can organize your data, as Bharat suggested already, is to organize it as per the movie names. Okay, so this is one activity that you're going to do. Now let me just stop here. So this is homework 1. Now this is an activity, very simple activity. Even if you're not using a computer, you can write down. I want you to write down this workflow and send me that. I want to basically a Word document or a text written on how you are going to organize your raw data, and I want that sent to me, and not I don't want to actually see your folder organization. I want the text that you're going to write about it. Okay, then next again I'm going to share my I'm again going to share my slides. Okay, we are going to do one more thing. So you can see my screen again. Okay, the activity that you are going to do is make a convention for sorting and arranging your raw data, and make a convention for storing your data. So you want to create convention for storing, sorting, and arranging your data, and you have to write it down, and that's going to be your homework 1. Is it okay? You're on mute, Madhuri.
So what do you mean by storing your data? Making a convention for storing our data?
You're going to tell me which folder is going to have the items. Which folder is going to be for what items? Understood?
I think so. When you see my homework, then you'll know the name whether
No, I will share with you the Sikkim workflow, so you guys can have you'll have an example to work with. Huh? Okay. So now we are going to move into something called as file naming. Now, file naming is something that we all assume is very easy, but file naming is one of the most difficult things to do. Okay. For all of you who have already done some research for your PhD, you must have realized through the work, through a few years into your PhD, that you have so many files, and to look for that file is impossible, sometimes irritating. Okay, and sometimes you want to throw your laptop or your device aside because you're not able to find that one file that you're looking for. That is because we don't have a convention to name our files. We don't actually have a transparent way of doing it. Now, it is very essential for us to develop a file naming convention, one which is transparent, that will help us locate our data, use our data, and reuse our data, not just for once, but also for multiple times in the future. Now, that's what we are going to do. We are going to create file names. Now, how a file name should be? A file name must be unique. Within your all materials, the file name should be very unique. The naming should be consistent. Makes organizing and finding materials in a collection as easy as possible. Must not interfere with the archival processing. Now, what do I mean by must not interfere with the archival processing is that certain systems allow certain file names and certain systems don't allow certain file names. For example, in Windows computer, you can never use a backslash as part of your file name. Am I right? Have you guys tried using a slash as part of your file name?
Special characters not allowed. That's what.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. No diacritics, and especially diacritics. If you're going to put a diacritics, sometimes it will be allowed, but it is not seen when you want to look for the file name. So no special names, no diacritics. So we are going to see that. So this is what a file name must be. Okay. Now, types of file naming. Are there very different types of file naming? Yes, there are different types of file naming. One is called as a sequential order. On the right, what you see is image, date, and number. Am I right? Yeah, that is basically a sequential order by which the file names are created. It is a system created file name. It is basically on sequential orders. 001, 002, 003, 004. All of you who have used a recorder before, you would have realized Zoom, Sony, whatever the recorder is, you will have a 001 at the end, and then all other files are going to be 002, 003, 004, and 005. Now that order is called a sequential naming. Another type of naming that language documentation is often used is called as semantic naming. Okay, basically we are going to give some descriptive information that is relevant for the file. Okay, now that is called as semantic naming. Now, how do you create a file name then? We have to be very careful with we have to be very careful with certain things. File names have a sort of a string limit. Many computers will not impose a string limit on you, but when you want to process those data, if your file name has more than 25 strings, it is going to be very difficult for it to process. Many programs and many scripts will not read file names that are more than 25 scripts, 25 characters. So don't use file names that are longer. Okay, pay attention to the characters you use. Only letters, numbers, dashes, underscores in file names. No special characters or diacritics. Okay. Tip 3, do not use spaces. Don't give space between your file names. If you give space between your file names, your computer will recognize the space as another character and it will process the file name as another character. All of you who have used PrathScript by now must have understood that if there is a space in the PrathScript in the file, then the PrathScript won't run. Okay, it will just come to a stop. Okay, and another tip that you should remember is do not use periods. Don't use dot. Dot is going to be used only at one place, that is to differentiate a file name from a file extension. And yes, and very importantly, use an ISO format dating system. Okay, year, month, date. YY 4-digit year, MM 2-digit month, and 2-digit date. Okay, always use a leading 0. So if you recorded something on the date 2nd of a month, you should represent 02, not 2. Have I made myself clear? Always use 0 before. Don't use 1-digit item. Okay, and practice versioning. So for example, there are multiple transcriptions of the same file, and if you're going to do multiple transcriptions of the same file, so what you're going to do at the end of each transcription, you're going to say underscore v01 or underscore v02 underscore v04. You're going to practice versioning, so you will know what is the latest version of the file that you should open. Okay, is it clear? These are the 7 tips of file names. Is it clear? So I'm here going to show you an example again from the Sikkim Center for Endangered Language workflow. This is a file name convention that we created for ourselves. We want sort of a convention of where we mix both sequential name order and the semantic naming. But what we try to do is, since we wanted to keep a character length within 25, we decided instead of going for a longer descriptive name, we decided to go for shorter descriptive names, and if not possible, we decided to go for codes. So we sort of decided what is going to be a code for what. Word list is going to be word list, sentence list is going to be sentence list, SL is going to be sentence list, and we are going to call it text as TX. Okay, we sort of decided this and we created a convention for this. So if you are going to name an audio file, the convention is going to have the first thing, it's going to have the ISO code of the language. Okay, then optionally, because some objects might not have, if it is a photograph, there might not be an informant at all. There might not be multiple sections. It is just clicking one photo of another. So optionally, this is the general format: informant ID, session ID. Now the informant ID is going to refer to the person, okay, is going to refer to the person who is the informant, and we are given unique ID for each informant, and that ID is going to be here. And then session ID, each session also got a unique ID, that ID is going to be here. And the content code, so word list here stands for WL here stands for word list. And unfortunately, while we designed this workflow, we did not follow the ISO code for date, but I would request you to follow the ISO code date system. So instead of doing date do the year date. Okay, is it okay? So this is sort of a pattern of naming convention for 4 media types. So how many types do we have? We have image, we have video, we have text. Am I right? In our data set?
Yeah, and yeah, we don't have the WAV file, audio file nahi hai.
Yes, so we are going to create naming convention for these 3.
We have PDFs also.
Yeah, but that's also a text. That's also considered PDF also a text. Text file and a PDF are all text documents. Okay, so you had 3 media types. I want you to create naming patterns for these 3 media types. So now that is going to be homework.
Karthik,
yes.
Karthik Mazir, how did you manage when there were multiple informants?
So for each informant, we had a code. In fact, it is B1, it is written, we had a B01, and our code gave us ability to go until 100 informants for each. So 99 informants for each language. Okay, so we randomly assign these codes. So we just say B001.
And suppose in a single record,
research scholars decided to go with one informant as the main informant and identified the recording with that informant. To stuff in all the information in the file names itself. We will use some of the informations. We will give some of these informations in the metadata separately. Don't try to code all the informations in the file name itself. Don't try to code all the information about the data in the file name itself, because we have a 25 character limit. So keep that in mind and create a file naming convention that is within this 25 character limit. You are free to decide what should be included and what should not be included. Okay, but you should be very transparent about what you have decided. So I want you to document your decisions and make a convention out of it. Is it clear?
Yes, Karthik, but I have a question. Because
yes.
Assigning codes it should be like the code will make sense only if it is followed throughout, right? So for that,
yes.
We should have another file which actually enlists what our codes exactly are, right?
Yes. Okay. Now that's called an authority file. That's called an authority file, and we will come back to authority file when we deal with metadata.
Okay.
So what does the code mean? Okay, either you can you will write it in the convention itself. Okay, along with the convention, you will tell me what are those codes. For example, if you're doing WL for word list, you will say WL is for word list. Okay, for example, we have song, you will say SG is for song. Is it okay? Something, whatever it is up to you. Not necessary you have to follow the same thing. So it is up to you. So you will create this naming convention and you will do that as a homework too. Is it okay? Okay. Now I'm going to talk about metadata and I'm going to stop it here. I'll just take 5 minutes, and tomorrow after these 2 conventions are done, your convention to organize your data, okay, your folder structure convention, and your naming convention is done, we will deal with metadata. We will take the whole day to deal with metadata tomorrow. Okay. Now what is metadata? Quickly, I'm going to answer that question. And information, it is an information describing the constituent resource of a documentary corpus. Okay, including for example their content, creator, and access restrictions. So it is going to be basically information about information. Okay, is that very clear? Metadata is going to be data about data. Okay, now Himmelman identifies 2 types of data, 2 types of requirement for metadata. One is going to be a metadata for the whole project. Okay, a metadata at the assemblage level at the top most of the hierarchy, and a second, a metadata at the resource level. Okay, so we need to have metadata at all intermediary levels. Is it clear? Okay, now that is what is metadata is. Now metadata can be categorized into different types. Three main types are there: descriptive metadata, structural metadata, and administrative metadata. Descriptive metadata is going to describe a resource for purpose such as discovery. So it is going to be at the resource level mostly. It is going to help me identify the resource. It can basically include then elements like title, abstract, and keywords, and authors. We don't have authors here, but we have creators and participants. Okay, I will come back to the terms that I'm going to use, and then I'm going to talk to you about more of them in tomorrow's workshop. Then there is something called a structural metadata. So there is where, for example, there is a song under a particular language. Now I'm going to tell you where do you find those songs and under which. So it is basically indicates how compound objects are put together. For example, how resources are ordered to form sessions. So that is a metadata information that is at the session level. What is this session? What types of resources are under this session? That's what we are going to look at. Okay, we already saw what are the hierarchies, right? Resource, session, corpus, collection, and assemblage. Am I right? So we are going to talk about how are these things grouped together. That is a structural metadata. And there are going to be administrative metadata. That is going to be technical information about the resource itself. If it is an image file, what type of an image file, if it is a text file, whether it is a text file, a PDF file, or a Word file, what is its size, all those informations are going to be technical metadata. Okay, these are all specifications about the digital object, technical specifications about the digital object. And there are going to be rights management data. Now, what is rights management data is going to be? Is going to be access protocol and intellectual properties. Okay, now is this data available under Creative Commons license, or is it available under GPL license? What sort of property license, proprietary rights entail with the document that you're going to sell? If it is going to be accessed for everyone, then you have to say that. Or if it is restricted, whom is it restricted? You have to say that. And finally, there is going to be preservation metadata, which contains information needed for archives to preserve. Now, this metadata is something that we don't fill. As depositors, we don't fill. It is something that archivists will do it at their end. So you don't worry about this. Now, this is what is metadata is. I'm going to stop here for today's workshop, and then I'm going to open it for discussion or questions that you want to ask. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now,
okay.
I went through the metadata thing very quickly. I will revisit it tomorrow, and we will be basically doing the whole, for the whole 2 hours, we'll be doing the metadata. By that time, you would have restructured and reorganized your data, and you would also renamed your files. Am I right?
Renamed
yes, no,
according to
I don't.
ISO code, etc. Right? Yes. Got it. So space out over here.
Yes.
Yep, got it.
No, I sort of rushed into this. Now, the ISO code that I referred to. Hello. Yes. Okay, we got multiple. Yes, Madhuri, you had something to say?
No, because the ISO code and the codes that you follow, that was for your language-based data, right? Right now, the data we have is completely different. So we don't have to follow the ISO code plus informant plus etc. here, but we have to basically land on a convention that we will follow throughout.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
Exactly. That's what we want. So
I think, Madhuri, we can use dummy.
Yes,
like any random ISO.
I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I'm going to leave it to you. I want you to create that convention, and I want you to stick to that convention. Okay, so the convention should be transparent enough, and I want you to follow that convention throughout. That's all. So this is part of designing your workflow. So that's what is the main aim for today. Now, once that is done, since we have already overcome this download challenge and understanding the data challenge, tomorrow will be much faster. Am I right? Yeah. So is there anything that you guys want to discuss here, or is there any particular difficulty here?
Kartik, how do I show you homework 1? I have actually done something.
Okay, just
do I share?
it to me. Yeah, share it to me. I'm creating homework 1 and homework 2 for others as what I call as assignments on Google Classrooms. You can share it. Okay. Now, image, text. Okay, good. And PDF. But you don't have a pilot, right?
Yeah, I just have marked a different date for it, and there is nothing. Just a random.
Yes,
thinking.
good. Now I want you to write it down in a convention format. Okay, so the Google Classroom is now going to contain, or is now you will find in the Google Classroom. I'm just uploading the workflow that we produced for the Sikkim University project. Just 1 minute. Yes, I'm adding the work. I'm adding it now. You will find it as an example that you can follow it through, and you are expected to create for homework 1 and homework 2 the same steps that we did for file naming convention and folder structure convention. Okay. Workflow example is there, and I'm just sharing the workflow example once more so all of you know what I'm talking about. In the Google Classroom, it is already shared, and I am have an introduction here. Then we talk about raw file handling. We talk about how to save the raw files into folder structures, and then we give a model here. Do you see here? This is a model, sort of an abstraction that we made, and we have given a graphical representation of that model. And I am also telling here at one point that all media files transferred to the computer must be backed up along with the same folder structure to an external hard drive by the end of the day. Is that clear? So I want you to write this first two major sections: raw file handling and file naming convention. That is going to be a homework for tomorrow. That is homework 1 and homework 2.
Got it.
Is it okay?
You have a chat in the chat box, Kartik.
Yeah, I'm just coming there. This sharing thing is not letting me. Yes, I saw the chat. Could you please post the homeworks as question in GC2? Yes, I will do it, Samita. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create the homeworks as questions in the Google Classroom. So you will all answer, you will all submit your response to it as an assignment. It will be created as an assignment, and each of you will be requested to individually turn in your assignments to that in the Google Classroom. Is it okay? And I'll also share, thank you. I'll also share a video on how to submit turn in assignments in Google Classroom. Sort of a video tutorial to do that. Okay, is there any doubts or any things that you guys want to ask me?
I'm good.
So should we call it a day? Anyone? Yeah. You're mute, Madri.
As usual. I was saying that the chat box doesn't have any questions, and I'm good. So if anybody, nobody else has some questions, I think we can go ahead and get to our homeworks. All right, I think we can. Bharat, we can do it?
Okay.
Dhanpati ji and Pranjit ji, I think all of us can go ahead. Okay.
Okay. Okay, what's this? Okay. If there is any feedback that you guys want to give it to me, I will put my phone number on the Google Classroom as well. You can contact me or you can mail me anytime.
Ha, take care. Take care.
Okay.
Thanks, Kartik, so much. So I think, yeah, somebody asking anything?
Nothing. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Ma'am, we are ending the class for today. I don't think she's here.
Yes,
she's here. Ma'am, unmute.
Ma'am, you're mute.
Meet you tomorrow, Kartik.
Yes.
6 o'clock tomorrow. I don't think we'll have any delays because all the files have been downloaded. We'll just look at our homework, then we'll go ahead and learn something about metadata.
Yes. We will meet at 6 only.
Yes, 6 sharp
yes,
tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 6.